I'm just looking over some of my messages this morning. I didn't get to this yesterday. I mentioned in a couple of weeks we're doing the show at the Wilson Theater in Rupert, and I've got a couple of wonderful people who are behind us. Ramsey Heating and Electric helping sponsor that program, as well as the Sergeant Chris Workman Scholarship Fund. And it's in advance of Memorial Day. It's our Memorial Day special. And Chris's mother sent me a note yesterday saying that all these people who think government should be involved in healthcare should consider the VA. If you wonder what government-run healthcare looks like on a wider scale, veterans. Well, they don't. Do they still call it the Veterans Administration? I was criticized because somebody told me about a year ago that the name has actually changed, even though the acronym is the same. It's A23. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And speaking of Ramsey Heating and Electric, well, we are getting into some of that warmer weather. And so, yeah, a little chilly this weekend. You might have to click on, just to get rid of some of the dampness, click on the furnace. But you got to start thinking about the air conditioning unit. And if you haven't turned it on yet, flip it on and see how it performs. Just do a test run. And if you've got issues, you need to call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric. They're out in Burley. They'll come out. They'll get the job done right. They'll get it done right the first time. Ramsey Heating and Electric is located at 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley. The telephone number is 678-0459. Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. So off air, I was talking with Steve Millington about the entitlement culture we have. And I don't think we're going to be able to. If we could put your energy in a bottle that you had a few minutes ago. I should point out, and Steve does this, and he's a man who uses clean language, but he gets his message across better than some of these late night comics.
Thanks, Bill. You know, this drama over the repeal of Obamacare, and by the way, they didn't repeal it; they just changed some of the statutes inside the bill. I'm one of the kind of guys who think the best possible solution is to destroy Obamacare and start over again. But for some reason, the Republicans can't figure out how to get that done. But one of the things we need to understand is, yeah, we do have certain rights. Is it unalienable rights, I think, is how it's referenced in the Declaration of Independence. Is that right? Or Declaration?
I think it's a declaration, right.
And so, you know, and that entitles us to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. As part of that,
paragraph 2, by the way.
Oh, thank you. One of the things that they don't state specifically in there is we have associated and incumbent responsibilities as beings, humans living on this earth, and that is to care for ourselves. Now, that was a lot easier done a few years ago, 100, 250, because everything with the complexity of our life has changed dramatically. But with that complexity comes also a great many rewards. In my, I call it my red room in my house. It's kind of a big family room. I have got maybe 6 or 8 paintings. They're prints. They're not originals. They're prints, but they're very well done, and spend a few bucks to get them, of old-time trappers. My favorite is called the Wyoming Trapper, and he's got his big capote on and his pelt hat. And sometimes I think I was born too late. I wonder if I could have enjoyed that. I look at those pictures and say to myself, oh man, wow. And then I think to myself, I'd have been dead long before now. My eyesight is not that good. I have had cataract surgery on both eyes. I have had multiple. I am very rapidly becoming the $6 million man from medical costs that I incur every day. So this medical thing is a major issue, and the older we get, the more demanding it becomes. But I think that the media has gone completely.
Oh my goodness!
Oh, criminy!
Did you hear? I'm going to play this. We can talk about it maybe after the break a little bit. But President Obama has weighed in, and man, did he ever get an earful last night from Charles Krauthammer.
But notice how it was complete moral condescension. The other guys are cowards because I and the people who support me and who oppose the legislation stand with the poor and the afflicted and all that, and the others are on the side of the rich and the powerful. That is nonsense. What the Democrats have done is practically commit political suicide to support a measure with 17% support in the population that does what we know has to be done, which is to curtail entitlement, starting to curtail by doing a curtailment of Medicaid. It's inevitable. It's in the future. Obama had 8 years. He didn't want to touch it. And pretend you could say this is something necessary, something people are entitled to, but to pretend that you are the one who is advocating a courageous position when it goes completely against what the public wants is complete nonsense. And Obama did that all through his presidency, always assuming he was on the side of the angels and always the one who was willing to go against public opinion when it was completely the opposite. He reminded us, reminded me, it's been 100 days, but good riddance, Mr. President.
Right. And you know, let's think about Charles Krauthammer for just a second here. He is a well-respected columnist and commentator.
And a doctor.
Pardon me?
And a doctor.
And a doctor.
With a medical background.
Have you ever seen him walk?
No.
No, he doesn't. He has I think he is in a wheelchair, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And it could be quadriplegic. You never see him move his hands at all. And so to have him talk about medical care and our responsibilities and our rights and so forth, this comes from one who has no malice aforethought, but who has provided and accepted responsibility and has overcome those difficulties to an extraordinary level. And that's, I think, all we're after here.
We've got more with Steve Millington on the way in just a minute. It's 8:30. We're at 50. Bill Cowley, too, on News Radio 1310. KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Steve Millington joining us in studio this morning on News Radio 1310. KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Before we get back to the issue of health care, Steve was commenting about the story earlier this morning, and I was talking about divorce in the first segment. There's also a story out from Fox today that says we're seeing a spike in divorces in this country since the election of Donald. So they're blaming this on Donald Trump, of course.
Oh, yeah, it's his fault. Everything's got to be Donald Trump's fault.
Well, because I guess people are trying to emulate him with multiple wives.
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, come on, Phil. Whoa.
Well, he's only one at a time. He's not like some of these guys over in the Middle East who have four at a time. But or big harems. According to the story, people are fighting. Couples are fighting over Donald Trump, and they're getting divorced.
The stress level in their life is just accelerating unbelievably because they get to talking about politics, and one of the other spouses is on this side of the road, and the other one's on the other side of the road, and the stress and the conflict just is overwhelming, and we've just got to get a divorce. And one divorce attorney from New York City, that makes her suspect as all get out. Yeah. Anybody from New York City is suspect, except Donald. But even him on occasion. But I thought to myself, this is it just once again points out the fact that we do not want to have any personal responsibility associated with our lives, and no accountability either. We don't want either one. We just want all of our right to health care and everything else in life, our safe zone, our bubble.
I used to joke when I was a kid. My dad for a long time was a registered Democrat, although he was one of the local directors with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. So that made you a Democrat.
That's right.
You basically had to be aligned with them. But he was a very conservative guy otherwise, and I know he had a George Wallace bumper sticker on his car at one time.
Whoa.
So Democrat, yes, but a very conservative one. And my mother was a Republican, but they were both united in the fact they didn't like President Nixon. Because when I was a little boy, I wrote the White House a letter, and I got a glossy photograph of President Nixon back in the mail, and my dad decided to hang it in the bathroom. So when you sat on the throne, the president was looking back at you. And there was the only thing I think politically my parents agreed on was they didn't like him.
They didn't like that. Okay, they can agree on that. That's good.
But it was a mixed marriage. One was a registered Republican, the other was a registered Democrat. And occasionally there was some conflict, but not a lot that I recall.
But more importantly than their political affiliations was their commitment to and an association with each other and their marriage. And in the intervening 40 plus years, that seems to have disappeared from our societal landscape. We don't that's not so important anymore. And that's a sad thing. That's a sad thing.
I almost think that, well, the reasons people get married obviously must be changing. But the political discussions at our table, the only time that I think my parents got worked up was when we would say something as kids, and then they would demand that we defend it. In other words, if you said, "Well, I think this Mo Udall is okay," I would be challenged by my parents to tell me what does Mo Udall stand for.
Yeah.
And so when you're
And
12 years old, you have to come up with an answer to that.
you can't just accept the media coverage. You have to determine your own belief behind it. Why do you think this way? And that those questions are gone. And we see that, I think, one of the reasons why we see so much angst on college campuses is the students there have never been forced or challenged to defend their beliefs and their positions. They just take them at face value, and that's what's current. That's the popular thing to do, so I'm going to do it.
We better point out, though, somebody might be deeply offended out there that some kids obviously still do.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to paint everybody with the same brush. I used a generalization there,
Get some
and
of
that's
us in
not
trouble.
correct. I'm surprised the phones haven't just jumped right off the wall.
But it is true. We have young people today who they're so upset if they hear something that hurts their feelings
Yeah.
that it should be, you have to call in the administration and you have to silence whoever is talking.
A kid back in the Midwest somewhere got disciplined in school because he, quote, liked. You know, when you go to Facebook, you could click the like button. He liked an image or a display or something of a toy gun. And he got disciplined because he liked that image. And I thought to myself, holy smokes. You know, the kid's in elementary school. You've
Well,
screwed him up for life.
The great thing about living in Idaho is that people here have an attitude of, I don't care if it offends you. That's why you get those stickers in the truck, back windows in the truck that
Yeah.
look like the state map is turned to the side so it looks like a
It looks
pistol.
like a gun.
If you put
Oh,
one of
boy.
those though on your book bag at school, you might be in trouble.
That's right. If you're gonna either that or you better make sure you turn your book bag 90 degrees so that it doesn't. Oh dear,
We've got more coming up with Steve
it's a
Millington.
good thing.
And we're going to talk a little bit about, I think the controversy is now dying down because the news cycle has moved on, but you don't have to drive too far away from here, and you're in the district of Representative Raul Labrador, which is why I think this story is generating a lot of interest even in southern Idaho. But more details on the way about that in just a few minutes. Bill Colley with you too on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We've got 51 at 840. Exactly, 843. And you're listening to Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Steve Millington, the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party, is in the studio with us. It's 51. And Bill Colley, too, as well. And I do want to mention the weather. Very nice the middle of the week, going toward the end of the week. And then cooling off and maybe some rain again towards the weekend. Seems to be the pattern we're settling into. Quick note, the weather is a service of Mountain Home Auto Ranch in Mountain Home. Tomorrow night, Republican Committee is having a meeting.
Tomorrow, excuse me, you scared me there. Wednesday night, that's our monthly meeting at the Planning and Zoning Conference Room in the County West Office Building on Addison Avenue. We're going to have a panel discussion, including Clark Kaufman and Maxine Bell and Devin Rigby, who is the district director for the Idaho Transportation Department. I think it's Idaho Department of Transportation, IDT. And they're going to talk about transportation issues, roads, funding, what do we need to do, what major issues are on the horizon. How do we get across this issue? So it's going to be a roundtable discussion, and it's going to be centered on transportation issues. And then today at noon, Mike Simpson is speaking. And I'm sorry, I did not make a note as to who is sponsoring it. In the back of my mind, I want to say Chamber of Commerce, but don't hold me on that. But at noon, he's going to be speaking at the First Federal Building in downtown Twin Falls. They have a little conference room in there, and he's going to be speaking there at noon today. Linda Cobra, if you're listening, give me a call and straighten me out on that, would you? So there's the what's going on for today.
We were talking off air that when the vote on the new health care bill took
Yeah.
place in the House the other day, Congressman Simpson was actually
He was chairing the proceedings.
yeah, he was up there with a gavel in the
Yep.
front of the room.
And I thought to myself, wow, I didn't realize that he was quite that high up in the leadership hierarchy in the House. So yeah, I said, whoa, looky here, there's Mike Simpson.
Which would lead you to believe that, now that he's achieved that level, a lot of people have said that this might be his last term, but he's in good health. And when you reach that level of leadership, do you continue to go on?
It would be a little tough to just give it up and say, gee, I've been here long enough, I want to go home now. The House is extremely tenure specific, and you've got to have an awful lot of time in rank, so to speak, in order to get. It's very very seniority specific, and so Congressman Simpson has reached the point where he has reached that level in there where he has a lot of privileges, a lot of opportunities.
In fact, I had a conversation with Randy Staples about the fact that he doesn't recall Mr. Simpson ever having a town hall meeting, at least not in recent history. And I suspect that Simpson could tell Raul Labrador, maybe you should do the same.
Yeah.
Labrador is standing there taking the abuse.
Wow, he had taken a lot of heat the last 2 weeks.
Here's my take. Mainstream media says, "Oh, this shows how mean-spirited Republicans are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." But he's not wrong, and when you're right, you don't have to apologize for being right.
Nope. I think most of the problems that Congressman Labrador has encountered has been a lot of kickback from, number one, a liberal media, and number two, a few liberal Democrats getting into the room and taking control of the microphone. Now,
planned to take control of the microphone.
Planned.
This is not anything that just kind of sprouts up from
this is not a spontaneous event.
Right.
This is planned in advance. The announcement was made that he would be in Lewiston to conduct this town hall, and all of the adversaries carpooled to the meeting, so to speak, so that they could be there in mass.
On the Soros bus, in other words.
Yeah, they rode the George Soros bus.
Well, every time he's on the show here, usually the next day, there is some column, the Spokesman Review. Now, it would take me 10 hours to drive to Spokane. But the next day, there's some smarmy liberal columnist who's tearing him apart for something he'll say on this program.
Right, and that's interesting. The Spokesman Review is based in Spokane. I'm sure they have a news desk in Boise, but they're located in Spokane, Washington.
There's a really good reporter, actually, in Boise. She's credited with sometimes one legislator said she knows things before we know that.
However, I did an interview with her at a state convention a year ago, and I thought she did a real great job. But it's interesting that they
Betsy Russell.
Yeah, that's it. That's the name, Betsy. It's interesting that they pound him so unmercifully. It's just ridiculous. A couple of things. Number one, he is a kind of like a lightning rod. He attracts a lot of noise, and that's kind of his style, and so forth. Okay. The other part of it is, in one of these articles I read about him this past week, it indicated that he now has a rather senior leadership position in the House Freedom Caucus. I don't think he's the chairman. Maybe he's a vice chairman.
Mark Meadows is the new chair, right?
Yeah.
And so he's the brains, I think, behind the whole operation.
So they're pounding him for these other events. Now, Congressman Labrador may have used a poor choice of words, but the intent was not misplaced. And if we dig into it a little bit, he's right on the money. Um, his comment about people don't die, uh, going to hospitals and so forth. Well, let's step back and take a look at Idaho for just a minute. You can go to a hospital and use the emergency room facilities, and you can't pay. Well, the hospital or the medical facility who provided the services for you will attempt to collect the money from you, and you just say, "Look, I'm broke. I can't do this." At that point, they can turn the claim over to the county. Now, the county has a clause whereby they can determine that you are indigent. Now, that might be a rather harsh none of us want to be called indigent
I
people.
suppose liberal media today would say that that's an offensive term.
Yeah, that's an offensive term, right? However, it's done tastefully, and you don't get your name broadcast to all of the world. But the county has to go through this process in order to qualify the individual for payment under the indigent health care plan. Now, the indigent health care plan is funded by state government, and they send the money to the county, and the county simply administers the payment of those funds. So in Idaho, two or three things happen. Number one, you can end up getting on the indigent health care list, and the county will pay your health care expenses. Now, that's rather harsh. You got to be a little bit on the destitute side in order to qualify for that. They don't give that money out to just everybody who walks through the door. So there's a list of predetermined conditions that you have to meet in order to get on that list, and that's harsh. If you are in the category where you are that needful, why haven't you gone in and signed up for Medicaid? Because if that's the case, you fall below that income hurdle rate, and that gets you on the quote Medicaid program unquote. Why didn't you go do that? It's out there. You can get on it, and just go.
Socialized medicine has been with us for 50 years.
It's there. What are you waiting for? And then there's another thing that's interesting. Medicaid, indigent care. Indigent care would be our very last resource, but Medicaid services, I don't think you have to pay anything to get those, by the way.
10 years ago, I had a friend, and he hosts my old time slot back in Delaware on the radio. But 10 years ago, he was working selling real estate. And he had a policy, health insurance policy, through the local Realtors Association. He's driving down the street one day, going home from his real estate office, when he suddenly had chest pains. And the hospital was a short drive away. He drove himself there, and he went in, and they determined he was having a heart attack. Luckily, it wasn't major, but he had blockages. So they had to do an emergency bypass surgery. Lo and behold, he discovered that the so-called insurance he had through his real estate association wasn't very good. And he said he ended up paying off bills on his own for years to take care of the surgery. However, he said, the public doesn't know this, but the hospital also has its own insurance policy for dealing with people who show up uninsured. So they're not going to go out of business because of this as well.
Right on. And most hospitals will make arrangements to accommodate the payment of obligations, financial obligations, your bill, if you will go in and sit down and talk to them and explain your situation and be upfront with them and say, gee whiz, this is a horrible situation and I need some help.
Did you see that piece I sent you this morning?
From National Review?
Right. Kevin Williamson, this is his second article on scarcity in healthcare. And he wrote one last week, and this is his follow-up, where he mentions you've got 4 kids, but you've got 3 apples, right?
Right.
And he said, so you go to Congress, and Congress agrees that every kid should have an apple. And then the UN agrees on it. And then he says Mother Teresa from heaven blesses this too as well, along with Mohandas Gandhi. And he says, so, now you have it on record and everyone agrees. It makes you feel better. Every child should have an apple. But when you come right down to it, you still have 4 kids and only 3 apples.
That's correct. It's an item of scarcity. We don't really. I understand the basic thought behind his article. At, but the flaw is, yes, the scarcity is self-imposed. We do have plenty of healthcare options available. You simply have to take responsibility and make sure that you're in a position to take advantage of it. And in Idaho, we have the indigent care, we have Medicaid payments, and the Medicaid is across the United States. And the other part of it is take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. There was an article that I read this morning in American Thinker, and the author was a guy named Guy Benson, and he published this in Town Hall, and and the article basically says, you think that the current GOP version of repeal and replace Obamacare is going to kill Americans? Well, Obamacare has already done that. According to the Center for Disease Controls, they confirmed that if the mortality had continued to decline under Obamacare, as it had done from 2000 to 2010, and it flattened out at that point and it no longer declined, there was 80,000 Americans died because the mortality rates, instead of continuing a downward trajectory, leveled off and began to incline. 80,000 additional people died as a result of that change. Now, that's a generalization, but the fact remains, before we had Obamacare, mortality rates in this country were declining, which means we were having longer life expectancy, and we could extrapolate that to mean we have better overall health care. That has ceased since 2013, and it's going the other direction. And so if you really want to look at who's killing people with their health care program, it's Obamacare. It isn't Trump.
And there was a story in the Washington Post, of all places, yesterday, very liberal paper, that Maryland had a risk pool already in place, but Obamacare destroyed that. And so now Maryland is going broke.
Trying to cover the costs.
Right.
And at the same time, there was an article yesterday on the news that several counties in Ohio are going to be down to a single insurer because the insurance companies are now abandoning the Obamacare. One county in Ohio, I'm sorry I did not get the name and it wouldn't mean anything to me anyway, has 0 health care providers in the county. You can't get health insurance there. Tennessee is facing the same issues and huge proportions, and could be catastrophic to their state budget operations if the state tries to step in, kind of like our indigent care program in Idaho, to step in and solve the problem. The people make too much money to qualify for Medicaid, and not enough money to pay their bills. Now, there is a clause in the IRS code where you can get tax credits to offset costs of medical insurance, and it caps out at 400% of the poverty rate, which for a family of 4 is about $90,000 a year. You can get significant tax credits in the neighborhood of $4,000 to $6,000 a year in tax credits on your tax bill. Now, don't go over the limit, because if you go over the limit, you have to pay all of them back. But as long as you're within that guideline, you can get additional tax credits on your income tax bill. You can get, for heaven's sakes, the media has blown this thing so far out of proportion. It is
all you can
stupid.
Say is the propaganda wing of the Democrat National Committee. Steve Millington, we'll see you next week.
They've gone great. Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night, too.
Yep.
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
County West.
Planning and Zoning Conference Room. See you there.